Mastering SOC 2 Report for Clients 1 SOC 2 Remediation Plan. The SOC 2 audit scope dictates what's scrutinized, and what's conveniently left out. How does the scope of the SOC 2 audit determine which of its systems, applications, and processes are included in the audit, and what specific boundaries or limitations have been established to ensure its operational excellence? The scope of a SOC 2 audit is a critical component in determining which systems, applications, and processes are included in the audit. The scope defines the specific components of the organization's internal controls that will be evaluated against the 5 trust services criteria: security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. To ensure operational excellence, the organization's management must carefully define the scope of the audit to ensure that all relevant systems, applications, and processes are included, while excluding those that are not relevant to the trust services criteria. This is typically done by identifying the specific services provided to clients, the systems and applications used to deliver those services, and the processes that support them. One of the key considerations in defining the scope is to identify the boundaries and limitations of the systems, applications, and processes that are included. This includes determining which specific components are in scope and which are out of scope. For example, if the organization provides cloud-based storage services to its clients, the scope may include the cloud storage application, the underlying infrastructure, and the processes used to manage and maintain the system. However, it may exclude the organization's human resources systems or other internal applications that are not relevant to the cloud storage services. Another important consideration is to identify any carve-outs or exclude certain systems, applications, or processes from the scope of the audit. Carve-outs may be necessary due to various reasons, such as the system or application being outsourced to a third-party provider, or the organization not having sufficient control over the system or process. For instance, if the organization uses a third-party payment processor to handle client payments, the payment processing system may be carved out of the scope of the audit, as the organization may not have control over the security and operations of the third-party system. Once the scope has been defined, the organization must establish specific boundaries or limitations to ensure operational excellence. This includes implementing controls and procedures to manage the in-scope systems, applications, and processes, and to ensure that they operate within the established boundaries. For example, the organization may establish access controls to restrict access to sensitive data and systems, implement change management procedures to ensure that changes are properly authorized and tested, and implement monitoring and logging procedures to detect and respond to security incidents. In terms of operational excellence, the organization must also establish policies and procedures to ensure that the in-scope systems, applications, and processes are operated and maintained in a way that meets the trust services criteria. This includes establishing clear roles and responsibilities, providing training and awareness programs for personnel, and conducting regular risk assessments and control evaluations to identify areas for improvement. In addition, the organization must ensure that its operational excellence measures are aligned with the SOC 2 audit requirements. This includes establishing key performance indicators, KPIs, to measure the effectiveness of its controls and procedures, and conducting regular testing and evaluation of its controls to identify areas for improvement. To ensure operational excellence, the organization must also establish a culture of continuous improvement and learning. This includes encouraging personnel to identify areas for improvement, providing incentives for reporting security incidents or control weaknesses, and promoting a culture of transparency and accountability. In conclusion, the scope of the SOC 2 audit is critical in determining which systems, applications, and processes are included in the audit, and what specific boundaries or limitations have been established to ensure operational excellence. By carefully defining the scope, establishing clear boundaries and limitations, and implementing controls and procedures to manage the in-scope systems, applications, and processes, organizations can ensure that they meet the trust services criteria and achieve operational excellence. In terms of remediation plan, the organization must identify the gaps and weaknesses in its current controls and procedures and develop a plan to address them. This includes conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify areas of high risk and prioritizing remediation efforts accordingly. Developing a detailed project plan to remediate the identified gaps and weaknesses. Assigning responsibilities and timelines to specific personnel and teams. Establishing a budget and resource plan to support the remediation efforts. Conducting regular status updates and progress reports to ensure that the remediation efforts are on track. Conducting testing and evaluation of the remediated controls to ensure their effectiveness. The remediation plan should also include a plan to ensure that the operational excellence measures are sustained over time. This includes establishing ongoing monitoring and reporting procedures to ensure that the controls and procedures are operating effectively. Conducting regular risk assessments and control evaluations to identify areas for improvement. Providing ongoing training and awareness programs to personnel. Continuously reviewing and updating policies and procedures to ensure they remain relevant and effective. Encouraging a culture of continuous improvement and learning. By following this approach, organizations can ensure that they not only address the gaps and weaknesses identified during the SOC 2 audit, but also establish a culture of operational excellence that is sustained over time.